Imagine this. You're standing in a vast shopping mall, fluorescent light pooling on polished floors, screens blinking from every corner. Every shelf is a promise. The newest phone gleams like a small future. The sneakers whisper speed. A watch boasts 16 kinds of wellness, as if time could be disciplined into mercy. You grip a cart and feel a tremor you don't name. It isn't hunger, it isn't need. It's the soft, electric buzz of a question. Why is it that the more I own, the emptier I feel? You know the script. You could buy most of this. You've earned it. Yet something tightens beneath the sternum, the way a violin string tightens just before it snaps. The aisles seem endless, but so does the restlessness. Somewhere behind the stacked boxes, the smiling posters, the friendly financing there is a trapdoor. You can't see it, but your body knows it's there. Haven't you felt it elsewhere? You open a refrigerator filled with choices and still mutter, "There's nothing to eat." You scroll through 1,000 bright lives and feel yours turn gray in the reflection. Your salary doubled from 3 years ago, but your sense of well-being didn't even edge up by a third. You thought getting the apartment with light from 2 directions would change the music of your mornings. Instead, you learned the new place's anxieties, the mortgage, the neighbors, the constant plans. Why does prosperity taste like thirst? How can abundance cast the longest shadows? We live inside a paradox so ordinary we stop seeing it. Comfort expands, yet the ache grows more precise. Late at night, the ceiling above you is a quiet mirror. The question staring back is not, "What do I lack?" but "Why am I afraid, even when I have enough?" And then the darker one, "If I lost this, who would I be?" So you bargain with yourself. Once I get that promotion, once I fit into that version of my body from last summer, once I check off the last box on the list called becoming a person, then I will exhale. You know what happens next. You arrive, briefly. Joy flares like a match reel, warm, already burning out. In the cooling ash, anxiety waits, patient and punctual. Will this last? Do I deserve it? What is the next step to secure the glow? Here is the strangest twist of our age. Happiness isn't something we're missing. It's something we're terrified of losing. Anxiety no longer rises from scarcity, but from the math of plenty. Happiness and fear arrive in the same envelope. The tighter you clutch one, the deeper the other etches its return address into your hand. And the numbers are everywhere: calories, steps, followers, square footage, annual reviews, credit scores, each a ruler pressed against your life, each offering a way to measure joy until it flinches. You become an accountant of the soul, reconciling the ledgers of should and have, discovering that surplus breeds its own deficit. What if all this measurement is not helping you live, but only helping you audit your longing? Look around the mall. Mannequins smile with closed mouths, like people who know a secret. The music is engineered to keep your gait steady, your pulse eager, your decision nearly made. Even comfort is curated. Even spontaneity is a product line. You can choose anything except stepping outside the choice architecture itself. Is that freedom, or just a bigger cage? Maybe there is nothing wrong with the objects at all. Maybe the error lives in a sentence you never noticed you were repeating. More will make it safe to be me. What if the real unease is older than your paycheck, older than your phone, older than the mall? What if you've mistaken acquisition for identity, and the one can never satisfy the hunger of the other? So let's not rush to fix it. Don't buy a new routine to repair the damage done by the old one. Sit with the discomfort the way a diver sits at the edge of the boat, toes curled over water dark as slate. Ask the questions that smell like rain. What is happiness really? Why does it grow heavier as I add to it? Who benefits from my confusion? Who would I be if I stopped performing contentment and started telling the truth? Don't answer yet. Answers are often well-dressed reflexes. Let the questions hollow out a space where something honest can stand. The real work may begin in a place you've avoided: the basement beneath the showroom, the machinery under the glitter. To understand why abundance breeds anxiety, you have to descend. Take a breath. Hold the rail. This is the threshold. Anxiety never really comes out of nowhere. It is planted early, like a seed you don't remember burying, watered by comparison, fertilized by culture, and eventually growing into a vine that wraps around your chest. Why is it that the more you accumulate, the faster that vine grows? The answer lies deeper than shopping malls or salaries. It lies in the way the human mind has been shaped for centuries. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest tragedy of mankind is not suffering, but the disconnection from the self." Think about that. You spend years chasing things outside you, titles, possessions, validation, because you want them to confirm that your existence matters. Yet the more you depend on outer signs, the further you drift from the inner self. What you gain is not happiness, but a rented identity, something that collapses the moment the scaffolding of status or achievement is removed. Consider Daniel. As a boy, his parents whispered a promise. If you study hard enough to get into a good university, you'll be happy. He obeyed. When he reached the university, the promise shifted. Once you land a secure job, then you'll be at peace. He obeyed again. Later, it became, once you buy a house, once you marry, once you have children, then life will be complete. Daniel checked off every milestone. And yet one night in his 40s, he woke with a start. A quiet panic whispered through the dark. Not a single one of these choices was mine. His life had been a checklist written by others. The more lines he crossed off, the deeper the emptiness dug. Nietzsche warned us, when you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. The abyss here is not death, not despair, but endless desire. You think you hold it on a leash. In reality, it is leading you. The essence of happiness anxiety is not deprivation, but entanglement. Your sense of worth has been tied to external outcomes. When you succeed, you feel good for a moment. When the ground shifts, your identity collapses, like sandcastles against the tide. This is the architecture of the trap. You start to believe happiness can be measured in digits on a paycheck, in the square footage of a house, in the number of likes on a post. The moment you reduce happiness to something quantifiable, you guarantee its disappearance, because every number can be compared, and every comparison breeds insufficiency. Schopenhauer, with his cold clarity, put it this way: human desire is a bottomless pit. The satisfaction of one craving immediately generates another. Life, he argued, is not a movement from pain to pleasure, but from one form of pain to another. You thought the bigger apartment would make you secure, but with it came the larger loan, the neighbors to impress, the next tier of pressure. You thought the promotion would validate you, but it only tethered you to heavier responsibility and deeper loneliness. What you bought wasn't relief, it was a more expensive kind of anxiety. Like a hamster on a wheel, you move faster, convinced you are progressing, while in reality, you are locked in place. The trap is not only personal, it is systemic. Advertising doesn't just sell products, it sells a story. You are not enough yet. Social media doesn't just connect people, it engineers a theater of comparison, where your inadequacy becomes profitable. Even self-help books whisper, if you fix yourself just a little more, then happiness will finally arrive. What looks like freedom of choice is often a pre-written script. You are told to pursue happiness, but what you are really consuming is an industry designed to keep you slightly dissatisfied forever. And here's the cruel irony. The more you believe happiness must be earned through milestones, the less capable you become of experiencing it spontaneously. You no longer eat to taste food, you eat to post. You no longer love to love, you love to prove you're lovable. You no longer live to live, you live to display. Life turns into an exhibit curated for validation. The raw, unfiltered moments are erased, while the polished fragments are uploaded for applause. The philosophers saw this centuries ago. Epictetus, A Stoic who lived as a slave declared, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." True bondage, he suggested, is not the chain of iron, but the chain of desire. If you live for what others tell you to want, you are no freer than he was in Rome, except you mistake your cage for choice. So let's name the root clearly. The core of happiness anxiety is the confusion between value and validation, between being and having. We've mistaken life for a resume, relationships for investments, joy for a scoreboard, and as long as we play by those rules, the outcome is guaranteed. More possession, more recognition, more visibility, always followed by more emptiness. But if that's the truth, then another question rises. If this anxious hunger comes not from the world, but from the architecture of our own minds, how could anyone escape? Is there a way to rewrite the script? Or are we doomed to forever chase a horizon that runs as we run? Before we look for answers, pause here. Let the discomfort sink in. Because maybe, just maybe, the entire pursuit of happiness as you know it has been one long misunderstanding. You might think happiness anxiety is just a private mood, a passing discomfort you can manage with more exercise, better routines, or a new purchase. But the truth is darker. It's not just an occasional cloud, it's a subtle poison seeping into every corner of life. It reshapes how you see yourself, how you love others, even how entire societies are built. It is invisible, but it directs you all the same. Take Emily. On social media, she curates her life like a museum. Every travel photo is carefully edited, every smile rehearsed until it looks candid. She tells herself she's just recording her journey, but inside, she waits for the wave of likes, the validation that confirms she's doing well. When the numbers come in, she feels a brief spark of triumph. When they don't, the floor gives way. The truth is, Emily doesn't really want the trip she takes. She wants the proof that her life is worth envying. What she's chasing is not joy but recognition. And so she is trapped in a cage of her own curation. The more she displays happiness, the more terrified she becomes that someone might discover the hollowness behind it. This is one invisible consequence. You lose the ability to experience life directly. You eat not to taste, but to photograph. You fall in love not to connect, but to prove you're desirable. You spend time with friends while secretly comparing salaries, homes, and bodies. Existence fragments into pieces that can be displayed, while the raw, unpolished reality is hidden like a shameful secret. Slowly, you forget how to live unobserved. Psychologists call this the trap of cognitive bias. One in particular, hedonic adaptation, explains why new pleasures fade so quickly. You buy the car, and at first it's ecstasy, the smell of the interior, the hum of the engine. Weeks later, the thrill dulls into routine. What remains is the loan, the maintenance, the anxiety of scratches. The brain resets, hungry for a new stimulus. You aren't failing at happiness. Your nervous system is engineered for dissatisfaction. The system rewards you for wanting, not for having. But the consequences don't stop with the individual. They scale up into the very machinery of society. An anxious consumer is the perfect consumer. A restless employee is the perfect employee. When you're convinced you're never enough, you keep buying, keep working, keep submitting. Corporations whisper, "Work harder, and you'll climb higher." Advertisements insist, "Buy this, and you'll be whole." Politicians remind you, "Obey, and you'll be safe." You believe you're making choices. In truth, you're performing a script written to keep you dissatisfied, productive, compliant. This is why happiness anxiety feels like an epidemic. It doesn't just haunt individuals, it fuels economies. It turns fear into profit and dissatisfaction into GDP. If everyone were suddenly content, entire industries would collapse overnight. So the invisible consequence is this: your restlessness isn't only personal, it is cultivated, sustained, monetized. And then there is the most intimate damage. The way happiness anxiety corrodes your closest relationships. Without noticing, you begin to compare, even in love. You want your child to excel, not only for their future, but because their achievement validates your worth as a parent. You want your partner to be admired, because their prestige reflects on you. What begins as affection slowly mutates into projection, into pressure, into a transaction. You don't just love, you leverage. And one day you discover you have stopped offering unconditional presence. What you offer is conditional recognition. A friend of mine, Michael, told me his story in a cafe in New York. For years, he had clawed his way through the corporate ladder. And finally, he bought the apartment he had dreamed of for a decade. At first, he thought the achievement would end his gnawing unease. But soon, he noticed the neighbor's larger apartment, the colleague's newer car. It felt, he said, staring into his coffee, like I'd climbed a mountain only to realize there was another peak behind it, and behind that, another. And another. He looked exhausted, not triumphant, as if he had been sprinting on a treadmill that would never stop. This is the hidden cost. Happiness anxiety doesn't merely rob you of contentment, it hijacks your sense of time itself. The present moment is never enough. Every experience is a stepping stone toward the next one, which will surely deliver the satisfaction this one failed to give. You live in perpetual deferral, chasing a horizon that recedes with every step. And here lies the urgency. If you don't awaken to this invisible machinery, you don't simply remain neutral, you sink deeper. The more you chase, the more the system rewards your chasing. The more you compare, the more society feeds you material to compare. It is a self-tightening loop. You wake one day and realize you don't know what joy feels like anymore. You only know how to want. So, let's pause. Ask yourself, what if this isn't just an unfortunate side effect of modern life? What if the entire game was designed this way? What if your unease isn't a bug, but the feature? If that's true, then a terrifying thought emerges. You are not living your own life. You are living in a cage so seamless, so invisible, that you mistake it for freedom. And once you see the cage, the question that burns is no longer, am I happy? But how do I break out? Once you recognize the cage, the instinct is to run. But how do you flee from something made not of iron bars, but of beliefs, desires, and comparisons? The harder you struggle, the more entangled you feel. Real rebellion doesn't begin with smashing the cage. It begins with seeing through it. The first truth is unsettling. Happiness anxiety thrives because your life has been scripted. You've been performing a role, one milestone after another. To break free, the first step is not to escape society, but to stop performing. Take Sarah. For 10 years, she fought her way up the hierarchy of a large firm. Finally, she reached the position her colleagues envied, the salary they dreamed of. Yet the emptiness grew louder. One evening, staring out of her office window, she noticed a street musician below, poor, unknown, singing without an audience. He had almost nothing, yet seemed free. Sarah realized with a shock. She had everything others wanted but no longer remembered who she was. Months later, she quit. She rented a small studio and began making pottery. Her life simplified, her bank account shrank, but for the first time in years she breathed without weight on her chest. This isn't a romantic fairy tale about walking away. It's a parable about agency. Sarah didn't rebel against society itself. She rebelled against the narrative that said her value existed only in promotion and applause. She took back the right to define her own worth. History is full of such rebels. Epictetus, born a slave in Rome, had none of the freedoms we assume necessary for dignity. Yet he declared, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, and it is won by disregarding what lies beyond our control." His point was radical. Chains of iron matter less than chains of desire. The one thing no master can touch is how you choose to see yourself. True rebellion begins in that invisible space. Now you may be thinking, does rebellion mean abandoning everything? Career, ambition, possessions? Not at all. It means shifting the terms of the game. It means asking, each time anxiety stirs, is this desire mine, or is it an implanted script? It means remembering that someone else's curated joy is not a mirror for your worth. The walls of the cage are paper thin once you see them. James's story makes this clearer. He was the archetypal runner, forever chasing the next promotion, the next raise, the next bigger house, until one day, illness forced him to stop. Half a year of convalescence stripped away the race. At first it felt unbearable. He wasn't moving upward. But gradually, he began to notice smaller rhythms, walks with his child, the slow unfolding of novels, afternoons without urgency. When he returned to work, he didn't resume the sprint. I realized, he told me, I had been running not a life, but a race, and the finish line kept disappearing. Rebellion starts with such moments of recognition. It isn't a single heroic act. It is 1,000 small refusals. Refusing to let an advertisement define your worth. Refusing to measure your love by status. Refusing to trade authenticity for applause. You still buy things, still strive, still dream. But now you know which desires are truly yours and which are borrowed costumes. Each no you speak to the machinery is a quiet yes to yourself. That is the taste of freedom. Not fireworks, but space to breathe. Not revolution in the streets, but revolution in the heart. And yet even this is only the beginning. Because stripping away illusions will eventually confront you with a more terrifying question. If you are no longer defined by possessions, roles, or validation, then who are you? This is where rebellion turns into something deeper. To face that question is to stand naked before yourself. It is not comfortable. It feels like vertigo. But it is the threshold you must cross. Only by daring to ask can you reach the truth that lies beyond both happiness and anxiety. When everything external is stripped away, titles, possessions, applause, you stand face to face with a question that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. Who are you? When nothing else speaks for you, it is terrifying because you realize how often you've relied on borrowed reflections. Without them, you are naked, uncertain, unmeasured, and here lies the ultimate truth. Happiness has never been about having more. Happiness is about seeing yourself. The reason happiness anxiety hurts so much is that it drags your gaze outward, forever outward toward what's missing, toward what others have, toward what tomorrow might promise. The chase itself becomes a smokescreen. Real happiness is not hidden in the future, nor is it encrypted in other people's recognition. It waits in the stillness of this moment, in your ability to notice you are already here. Buddha once said, "Desire is the root of suffering." This was never a command to abandon everything. It was an invitation to notice that if you hitch your peace to desire's chariot, you will always be pulled forward, never arriving. Nietzsche, from a different path, echoed, "Become who you are." The paradox unites them. Freedom does not come from acquiring, but from accepting the responsibility of self-creation. Let me tell you about Oliver, an old man I once met. His health was failing, his strength slipping away. One day, a friend asked him, "What is the most valuable thing you've ever had?" People expected him to say family, wealth, or legacy. But Oliver smiled and said, "One morning I sat alone in my garden. The sun came through the leaves. For a moment, I wanted nothing. I lacked nothing. That was it." That morning, more than decades of achievement, was his treasure. You might think such simplicity is naive, but it is exactly what we forget in our sophistication. We believe happiness must be complicated, built like an empire, earned with years of struggle. But often it hides in what cannot be bought: a cup of tea, a sudden breeze, an unguarded laugh. The revelation is this: you do not need to chase happiness. You only need to pause and notice. Happiness is not a result, but a relationship with yourself, with others, with the world. When you stop comparing, you discover sufficiency. When you stop clinging to labels, you discover that existence itself carries meaning. When you stop fearing loss, you discover anxiety itself can transform into a reminder that you are alive, breathing, here. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. Bills remain. Work remains. Uncertainty remains. But what changes is the axis from which you move. No longer driven by fear of not having enough, you act from clarity of what matters. You may still pursue ambition, but it is ambition chosen, not imposed. You may still buy, but you buy with awareness, not compulsion. True rebellion culminates here, not in walking away from life, but in reclaiming authorship of it. You see the machinery that sells anxiety as necessity, and you smile. You no longer need to escape. You only need to refuse to be enslaved. So let the final truth settle. Happiness is not a destination, but an awareness. Anxiety is not an enemy, but a signal. Freedom is not in owning more, but in no longer fearing the empty spaces. And once you understand this, your life feels like a film where the camera suddenly pulls back. You look at the years behind you and see the cage you once mistook for a home. You look ahead and realize there is no finish line, to chase only the road itself, stretching out, open, alive. For the first time, the lack of a destination doesn't terrify you. It liberates you, because you finally know you are already on the path, and the path itself is meaning.